in the beginning, it'll just be prep talk. And I hope everyone is doing good, being indoors or wherever you are, if you know how the lockdown measures are, and keeping safe as well. And yeah, so I don't know if how many of you are aware, but this workshop will be recorded. And but for right now, it's not being live streamed anywhere. So, just to be aware of that in case you wouldn't want, say, if you ask questions and you do not want that to be recorded. But if you're fine with it, completely feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. Otherwise, we have these chat rooms. You can use Zoom chat or Discord. I'm keeping both of them open. And in case if I miss any questions, Cecilia, she's the co-host, and she will make sure to ping me about that. If anyone needs to still join Discord, if they're not already on it, can ask, and I'll paste their invite link or ask Cecilia to do it. Okay, I think. Oh yes, and I was thinking about doing introductions, but since there's so many that will be joining it, it may not be feasible. But here and there, I might ask polls just to get a better understanding of your knowledge level and how I can show you things. So I want to make sure everyone gets a fair share and is able to understand and follow. And well, yes, hopefully you've all done your lab setup, because that does take time, and I will go through it a little bit again as a refresher. And now I'll start sharing. Okay, I also want to make sure, my voice is clear, you can see things. And you can see the slide perfectly. Cool, yeah. If you can send a message on Zoom or Discord, wherever. So first off, malware analysis. Oops, a taste. So because it's advertised as a beginner level, I'm not, I don't expect any of you to come out after 3 hours a complete malware analyst pro. But the idea is, once you come out of this, you get a better sense of where you want to proceed, whether you want to continue improving skills for malware analysis, or even you'll be able to get skills to be able to converse with someone about malware, because now you understand what it's like to analyze malware and research and learn more about it. So it's just a taste. First few disclaimers. I'm just going to move this to the side. Oops. I just want to say that anything expressed here, they are strictly my own, not that of my employer. I'm doing this as volunteering, and I just like to share with all the women and other groups out there more information about malware analysis, because it tends to be so vague. So strictly my own, not that of my employer. And yes, and I shared some samples. They're password protected. I'll share the password later. And they are malicious. They're not recent malware samples, so I don't think the malware command and control should respond back. But if you do run it, it can change your system and install other potentially harmful things. So you definitely wanted to handle it in a safe environment, and that's why we have a lab set up for that. And also a bit about me. So my name is Suvira. So, in case people don't read the emails, I've been doing malware analysis now since 2011, since started working. So yeah, it's been a long time. And I've mostly been focused on Windows malware, and that's what we'll be focusing in this workshop too. So yeah, the contents, I'll just give a little layout of how we're going to proceed with this workshop. First, a little pep talk. We won't dive directly into the VM. And you can think of this pep talk, which is the intro, as more as how to prepare yourself, your mindset, how to start thinking as a malware analyst. And the best place I thought was to start as who does malware analysis. And so now you can get an idea of that. And Skillzzz, I just touched on it really briefly. It's, yeah, so you know, at least, you know, you don't need to have all the skills that I do mention, but it just goes to show that any one different skill level can do malware analysis. And also trends, so you get an understanding of the current cyber threat landscape. You know, what's the most prevalent malware out there. And that helps definitely. And after that, you know, we'll move to the lab prep. I'll go over the guide, making sure, you know, if anyone has questions between then and now, ping on Zoom or Discord. And for those that, you know, were able to set up this lab easy, feel free to pitch in and help anyone else. Because if, you know, if setting up VMs is not something you do frequently, it can be confusing and a bit too chaotic. So feel free to pitch in. I want to be this, you know, as organic as possible, not just me. And then, yeah, I have actually 3 samples. We're going to work on it bit by bit. And currently, now the time is 9:10. I'm hoping at least the 2 hours of the workshop we put towards the exercise. And I think, yeah, we should be able to do that. Okay. So yes, it's quite a bit of an agenda here. So kudos malware analysis. I personally could only think of, you know, my job role, and I knew of a few other job roles, but the best place was, you know, to do a Google search. Oops, let's go back. And these titles here that I mentioned are just some titles that are more common, are more that you hear about, like incident responders. I would say malware analysis is just part of their role. Usually their role is to find, you know, a customer approaches them and they're like, what's happening to my system? You know, so there's something odd going on, some behavior. They might share logs about their system to the incident responders, so on and so forth. And so they also tend to, you know, have to do malware analysis because they try to identify if there's a malware being run on the client system or something along those lines. Or yeah, then there's forensic investigators, you know, trying to identify who the threat actors are behind some cybercrime. Cybercrime being someone that's created ransomware, so on and so forth. Or it could be a malware researcher, kind of what I do also as well. So yes, as you get a sense here, it's mostly researching as much about this piece of binary, trying to understand how it works, everything, you know, about it. In fact, let's just do a Google search. So, you know, I'm based in Montreal. So of course I get all sorts of search results in Montreal. But yeah, you can see, like, for example, antivirus companies, they might hire a malware analyst to do analysis on the file so that they can write signatures. They can write rules to detect files. Or, you know, it makes sense that banks would need to hire malware analysts. So you could see like how much in demand it is. But truthfully, you know, it could just be your hobby. How do I make it full screen? There. And yeah, I don't think anyone would have questions, but if you do, you know, feel free to put on Zoom or Discord about this. Also, I know that some of you are in the cybersecurity field, right? So probably already know what it involves. Who does malware analysis? So now for the skills. Since this is in this workshop, you know, I'm going to talk mostly about Windows, but malware can extend to anything: Android, Linux, so on and so forth. But when you're dealing with Windows, it helps to know a bit about Windows internals. So how does the Windows OS do memory management? How, you know, about Windows registry keys, things like synchronization objects. So if you're a programmer and you build a lot of things for Windows, you know, you get a better sense of that. Why this is important? Because you have to think in terms of a malware author. As a malware author, you're trying to infiltrate into a computer, and in this case, you are looking at infiltrating into a Windows operating system. So you're trying to find ways in which you can make yourself stealthy and persist through the system without being detected. And having that knowledge definitely helps. So when you start analyzing a piece of malware or reverse engineering it, you understand why that piece of binary is doing what it does. And you're like, aha, it's trying to hide itself from any antivirus software, or it's trying to create some sort of persistence, like register itself in a registry key, so on, so forth. Then, we have Windows file formats, so different types of files that would normally run only on a Windows OS, because an executable that would run on Windows doesn't run on Linux. And that's your portable executable PE file format. Knowing assembly helps for reversing. So in this workshop, I won't go through much about file formats or assembly. The idea is beginner, so anyone that has access to tools should be able to do this. But also, it touches a little bit on internals, but as we play through the VMs, you'll get an understanding for what I mean. And that brings us to dynamic and static analysis. It's not only, unique to Windows malware. This is across all malware, but I just didn't know where to put that point in this slide, so I just put it under Windows malware. So dynamic analysis is analysis where you're running your malware and you have different tools and you're trying to observe what this malware does. And through those tools, you get an understanding of where it's trying to install itself, for example, any network connections that happen, so on and so forth. And static analysis, it's more, I would say it involves reversing as well. And you're looking more into the binary file, going really low level from there. And I think in the second sample, and also the first, we're going to do some static analysis. What also helps as a malware analyst, I find, is to be on top of trends in the threat landscape. So, you like on Twitter or reading any news, cyber news, about what prevalent botnets out there or campaigns out there, or APT groups, advanced persistent groups. And a lot of times when you read blogs about it, you'll see that these blogs have articles that talk about the analysis. So that's perfect, because and they usually share the hash of the malware sample they talk about. So that's great. You get the malware sample and then you try to mimic those exact same things. And it's a great way to learn as well. And yes, keeping in touch with the community like us via Cyber and others in Montreal, WoSec Montreal or MTLSec, or wherever everyone is, So, because I assume people are from different parts of the world. And maybe Facilia later may create a poll to see that, to see where everyone is from. Okay. Okay, so this, I think, is my last pep talk slide. So this is just, I thought of just listing of some, just a few, of the different types of malwares that's out there. And I'm pretty sure many of you, maybe, you recognize ransomware, and then you have exploit kits, botnets, there's rats, worms. Actually, just to give like a show of hands, do many people, do you know most of the types of malware that's listed here on the slide? Feel free to use Discord or Zoom. Just want to get a sense, and I could talk about it a bit. Okay, so yes, on Discord, we've got, okay, so I didn't really clear, I might not say your name just because, it's being recorded, but I'll just say, someone on Discord said, stealers and filers attacks are new to me. Okay, that's cool. So I'll explain a bit about that. Stealers, sometimes it's hard to differentiate them from rats, rats being remote administration tools. but because they more or less tend to have overlapping styles, I would say. So stealers tend to be, you have a credential stealer, and say, unbeknownst to you, you download what you thought was a clean file, but it happens to be a stealer. And once it got installed, it tries to log your keystrokes, so like a keylogger. So if in case you're trying to go through banking site, it's stealing your credentials, that's a stealer. Or it could be stealing, say, your crypto wallet. If you don't change the location of where you store your crypto wallet, it can steal all that information and maybe your coins as well. So stealers can encompass all that, or it could even just steal your email address contact list, yeah, from your Outlook process. And that's really common because a lot of businesses still use Outlook. So malware authors still, target Outlook, and they want to steal that email list so they can spread more spam and more of their malware through spam. Fileless attacks, I would say, it kind of sometimes goes hand in hand with exploit kits. Exploit kits being, say you visit what would normally be a clean website, say a reputable news source, but it got compromised. And so now that, when I mean compromised, what it means is a malware author has found a way to infiltrate through their server and is now delivering has now inserted a malicious script that is delivering malicious payloads. And from there, normally fileless attacks tend to happen because this malicious payload, what it does is it tries to find out, it's a script, it's running in your browser. It finds out that you're running a vulnerable software and it exploits that vulnerability. So instead of actually downloading a binary onto your system and executing it, it delivers the payload through this vulnerable software by some exploit, and it's running in memory. So in that sense, it's a fileless attack. And there's many different techniques by what that happens. Air gap is actually new, and there are a few APT groups, advanced persistent threat groups, that I think 2 that were noted to use it. It was a 1, I don't quote me on this. And air gap means it's able to use other frequencies like sound, or I think sound is one of them, to be able to deliver their malicious payload onto your system. Normally what we know is malware can travel via network, like your worms, which spread via network, or spam, email, exploit kits, where you visit a compromised website. That's how malwares deliver themselves. But now air gap, I mean, they just basically, they're able to transfer that malware to you by some audio device, for example. So that's crazy. And then yes, I'll just quickly touch on ransomware. Ransomware, as you all know, it's a type of malware that tries to ransom you into paying the malware authors. And the way they do it is they encrypt all your precious files. Could be documents or pictures or anything. And the rootkits and bootkits, they tend to target the kernel level, the kernel memory level of the operating system. This is now when it comes to Windows. So, it's able to bypass, it tries to bypass via that way a lot of security measures, because now in kernel level, it has access to a lot more things versus the user land memory level. Virus are your file infectors. They tend to append their malware code onto other files. And botnets, again, they install a bot on your machine, and they've installed the same bot on many other victim machines, and those victim machines communicate with each other. So this is more or less what it is, and you probably want to keep some of them in mind, because in the exercises, what we'll be doing is I'll ask you, as you look at the dynamic analysis and as you do static analysis on the file, what type of malware we're dealing with. Okay, so apart from that, no more new questions. We're going to go ahead. It's not moving. Okay, this. Ah. Oh yes, I thought it was my last slide, but it's not. So what was I trying to go with this? Ah, yes, the malware lifecycle, correct. um, so in this part, I just want to talk about, okay, it's all good and fine if you're analyzing malware, but maybe it helps to get a bit more context on how we can analyze it better. So, always having like a sort of an outline. Now, this is not just a set outline, but having an outline on way to proceed always helps. And you may find if, once you're being asked to do malware analysis, that people like a report on the malware you've just analyzed. And you'll notice that they tend to follow the same idea as that of pen testing. So first, you normally, and if you Google about this, in fact, you'll find articles that say the 5 stages of malware cycle, or 7 phases, or 8 phases. I've seen some say 13 phases, but it's up to you how you want to classify that. And I'll just touch on what some of the common terms out there. But if you're talking to a very general audience, you probably want to also define how you define these terms. um, and then also, so when you're reading, an analysis report, you'll see them talk about reconnaissance, initial compromise of target. So the very first step, how the malware entered into your system. Was it by spam? Was it an exploit kit? Did someone click on some link? Were they downloading, a cracked software that they're not supposed to, but they did it anyways? Things like that. And then from there, you move on to infiltration, which is what's the malware trying to do on the system? What's its end goal? Maybe it's trying to collect, it's a stealer. It's collecting all your credentials, or it just wants to mess up with your system. So it's a ransomware, all that still. And also, what information is it trying to collect and send back to its malware server? And so things like that, exploitation, what it's trying to exploit, any vulnerable software, privilege escalation, how it's trying to make itself persistent on the system, so how it's trying to make itself as a system process. So it's really harder to remove it from your machine. And the persistence, lateral movement, from there, does it stay there on your machine, or is it looking at infecting maybe more machines on your network? Or maybe it's it stole all your contact list and now it wants to spread itself. And also, yeah, command and control, exfiltration. Command and control, I'd say, is almost always there with malware, because at the end they have a goal. They did what they want to do on your system, but they want to send this information back to their server, because most likely on that server you have this author that has a panel, a command and control panel, that is able to see, is able to log the progress of their bots, and is able to control what information that the bot is sending back to them. So, having this in mind will definitely help, and we'll go through that in some of the exercises as well. Any questions? Okay, I see nothing so far. Good. Oh yes, and throughout, just refill your tea, coffee, whatever you need. Okay, lab setup. Oh yes, let's just do that again. So, I'll just open up my VMs. Before I do that, I just want to talk about why we did a lab setup this way. Some of you probably already guessed why it's happening that way, but this is kind of the idea. So, this whole big box here is your host. It's your main machine that has these virtual machines. And then in this case, I named the network adapter that you may have noticed, mal demo. So this is, my internal network adapter of the VM, and these are the 2 VMs. And so the idea is only these 2 VMs should be able to communicate with each other. So technically, I should put this arrow also the other way. And it should not be communicating with the host, and the host is the only one that communicates with the internet. Anyone has any idea why I set it up that way. Okay, we're getting some responses. Cool. So one is to avoid virus propagation. That's very true. Imagine if these VMs, now we're running a malware here in Windows VM. It communicates to the host. That means it has access to the networks that the host has access to. And if it's a worm, you're looking at spreading. Now, if you have other machines on your Wi-Fi, you don't want your family members to catch that malware for sure. Eliminate attack surface on host. Yeah, so essentially the same, like avoiding propagation. And yes, you don't want the host to be impacted. And another things, you know, because we talked about command and control. So now this VM, it's a VM. You know, you definitely don't have anything personal in there. Hopefully not. But still, you don't want them to send information back to the internet. But there are malware analysts that do that, like me. You know, I do want that information to go back to their C2, but I'll talk about that later. But for now, you know, starting, we just want to keep it simple. You really only want to talk about what's happening within the operating system. So before that, I had actually set it up this way with the host-only adapter, and later, you know, realized my error. And that's why you may have noticed from the guide I asked you to change. And this, I would say, is a no-no. But maybe when you do come across, say you're Googling, how do I set up a malware analysis lab? You will find some people actually do this, and they might have their own valid reason for whatever. But you know what I would say? Currently, my host is Windows. But say if my host was Linux and I'm only dealing with Windows malware, I think it's safe. You know, it's okay. But still, it's you know, it could run into errors. Say if that Windows malware happens to be cross-platform, so it can also run on Linux. So yeah, but as you do this more and more often, you'll understand, you know, how to make it secure. I mean, best case scenario is you just have a complete separate Ethernet and internet, Ethernet cable to internet, you know, separated from your home network. And I think that's even safer. But yeah, this is something I normally avoid. Let me see if I had some other examples. Oh yes. So here I had some examples of some of these other blogs. I thought, you know, I'd definitely like to share, not pushing for any individuals' blogs, but I looked for some interesting examples. Now, like this person, for example, here, you can see they have three VMs, and one of the VM is the analysis machine. In our case, it is the Linux, and the Windows is the victim. But this is, you know, if you're also analyzing Linux-based malware, and you can see the host is here, and there's a separate, this shared folder is a bit different, and then there's the internet. So you can do it different styles. Let's see, I think this one here, I should make it a bit bigger. Okay, there, that's better. Close that. So here you can see, okay, this is internal network, cool, and it's also on a VM, that's fine. Yeah, so it's more or less like how we'd set up, and then, you know, here's your router, your Wi-Fi, and that connects to the internet. What's these other ones? So yeah, this was part of, here, I think, yeah, here they used the host only. I think this mentioned it somewhere, they use host only, but yeah, in host only mode. But, you know, I wouldn't do this necessarily. Okay, so actually I'm just going to open the guide here, and so we can just recap what we have done so far. Yeah, so this is what we want to aim for. The VMs are here. Before I talk about the guide, I just want to show how I built this lab setup. Yeah, we are still before 2 hours, so that's perfect. And half an hour should show you all of this. And so the Windows, you know, normally it's not free. So, but there is Microsoft. They provide a bunch of free virtual machines. I can share these links, after the workshop, so don't feel the rush to copy any of these links or anything. But here, these are test VMs, and you can download them. Before, they used to have Windows 7, which would have been a bit easier, but right now there's only Windows 10. So, and you can download the particular test VM for whichever type of VirtualBox software you're running. So this was where I obtained the VM and Remnux. For those that may not know, it's again a Linux-based distro that already contains a different set of tools. So if you have had time to explore, that's great. And this is their website, which I'll share the link as well later, and you can read more about it. The only difference with the one that I made you download was I installed IDA free, IDA 7, as well as Ghidra. Those are disassemblers. And I'll talk about the tools later. And I've created even a markdown sheet of some of the tools, but not every tool that you can use for malware analysis. So now we got a background where the VMs came from. It's okay, let's so at this point, I would say I'll go as slow as possible. But if you think I'm going too fast, do ping on either Zoom or Discord, and I can slow it down. So our demo. So now we will start. So first off, I have over here. Let's go to my desktop. I have over here my samples file, and I'm going to transfer it to my Windows machine. That's correct. Oh, I already have it there. Never mind. Okay, skip this file. So go ahead and do that. Transfer your samples file, and let me think. You know what? Before we look at some of these files, we're going to look at some of the tools. That's a better idea. And what you'll notice, and maybe you'll want to keep this open on the side, is in the same repository, I've created this list of useful tools. These are not exhaustive lists, but they will help you when we look at some of these samples. And that's just, how to proceed. These lookups, what I call lookups, is kind of the idea I was giving, so do some OSINT. Some of you may have heard of virus total, and oh, damn it, okay, this one in a separate. It was the most popular one. Almost every malware analyst knows about it. It's where you can submit a file and you get a report about the file, or you can search any information about the file by hash. On that note, I'm going to give you the password for the samples.zip. I'm going to type on Zoom first. So it's infected123, and then on. Normally, you'll see a lot of times people just put infected, but and I thought that some of you might try that password, so I didn't want y'all to open it. And of course, I just append 123. It's not the most secure, but whatever. Don't worry, they don't have any extension on the file, so they shouldn't run. But that's just to keep ready, and you can have an idea. Actually, before we go to the tools, ground rules. This is something, so I'll just make that bigger. So yes, to prevent running the sample accidentally, you rename any of your sample without an extension, and that is what I've done with the samples in the samples.zip archive. And then now say you get yourself a hand of some malicious sample and you still want to analyze it, but you don't want to look into a VM because it involves starting up the VM, it's taking time. Well, preferably you want to analyze it on a platform it is unable to run. Because last thing you know is, oops, you slip on your mouse, you double click it. It's a pain. And also what I recommend is if you're sharing samples for threat research, you're collaborating with someone. Okay, someone, so for those that don't have the link, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the link. I'm going to share the link of the samples one on Discord. You should see it says download. Let's do that here. Copy. There. So yes, meanwhile, as I speak, shall see. Okay. Yeah, and if you're sharing samples, preferably put them in a password protected archive. Infected is the default. And then, one thing is, if it, so your antivirus, for one example, wouldn't just clean up and quarantine those files and then you don't have access to them. And also just to be safe, so at least the individual's aware that it is malware. And yeah, so updating analysis tools like the VirtualBox, in case there's a malware out there that's using a pretty relatively new exploit. And sometimes it also helps when when you're keeping track of cyber trends, what's the new big vulnerability out there. This is what helps. Yes, I do not recommend keeping any important files, password, key files, and VMs. That has happened to some researchers out there, and then you have the whole Twitter shame thing going on. But yeah, you definitely don't want that, because malware authors, they realize that some people are careless and they look for all that in default folder paths, and preferably isolate the network. And if you don't isolate the network, and this is you want to be able to, say, connect to the internet or something, preferably use VPN, because from the command and control side, from the malware author side, they can potentially see from where the connection is coming to. So you don't want to give your whereabouts. And I would also say, yeah, definitely isolate within your devices in the same network. And you'll find, if you are a malware analyst or currently in your job, because some of you are already in cybersecurity, that there's always different networks. Some companies like to call it the dirty network, so on and so forth. And so to make sure it's not on the same corporate network, that would be embarrassing that you run malware on a corporate network. Definitely not to do that. These are some things I could only think about. There could be more, and if any of you have any ideas, because some of you are in cybersecurity, do feel free to share. I would like to know too, as well, and many others in this workshop. Yes, okay. So this is the first exercise, but before that, we're going to look at some of these tools. Yes, so the lookups, the way the lookups work is, so you get the hash, and what you'll notice that the samples here are already renamed by that hash, so you can copy those names and look it up here, but dang it, please don't do that, because I want you all to be able to guess what type of malware we're doing, and I will show you later what it's like. But if you want to do it, you can do it. Okay. And then you have Malpedia. I found this really helpful. What it does is, say you come across, many people are talking about a particular malware family name, but you want to get a good, like you want to get more information about it. And this is, a pretty useful tool. It's a free service that's offered by these guys, and it's pretty cool. So it's not always up to date, but I think on most prevalent malware it is. So say, for example, Emotet, for those that may not have heard about it, it's a pretty popular downloader banking Trojan. So, you want to get more info, a bit definition of what type of malware family it is. And then these are all references, any blog articles, any advisories about it, you will see them, and it's by order of date. So this is really cool. And if you have to write a report, you know where to start. You can see other people's technical analysis on it, and also possibly learn a lot more. So I like that tool. And then you also have Alien Vault, another place where you can look up on a hash. MITRE ATT&CK is also pretty neat. I find it pretty neat for advanced persistent threat groups. So now you know a particular malware family, malware is coming from a particular APT group, and you'll see these like group 34 or APT 34, and what does that mean? And in their groups page here, you will see as well. So yeah, because if you have access to all these links, so feel free to go to some of these links and look, and you can like look up information about them. And MITRE ATT&CK, they like to so going back to the cyber kill chain, the phases, they put this like pretty cool grid about where in that grid in the phase of execution of infection the particular malware family falls into. Thing was this, I forget how you get to that, but anyways, this is one of the many tools, and there's other lookups as well. Feel free to share. So Windows tools, I mentioned the ones that I've installed on this VM, except this guy, PEID. I forgot to install it, but that's fine. And PEID, PE being portable executable, those stand for Windows executable binaries. They give you, so you want to look up what type of file you're dealing with. Is it packed? Or is it, if it is packed, what packer is it packed with? Things like that. And then you have your sysinternals tools and Microsoft's Network Monitor. These are both Windows-based tools, and they're also provided by Microsoft. Sysinternals actually wasn't part of Microsoft before, but those guys were so good that now they work under Microsoft. It was created by Mark Rusinovich. There's definitely a lot of tools here. I've only installed 2 of them, and you can go through it. So now you can go into your Windows VM. So you'll see Process Explorer. Because the VM is 64-bit, so I'm running the 64-bit process. So you can double click it, and you'll notice it's like your task manager. So you'll see the process. You'll see things like how much CPU RAM it's using, PID, so the process identification. Oh, cool. So on Discord, as someone's mentioned, that sysinternals soon going to exist as a Linux tool yet. That's neat. I had no idea. I should look that up later too. Okay. And so yeah, it's like your task manager. And now let's open calculator. You don't have to do this, but oh, whoopsie, there. That is not the spelling. This is the spelling. Okay, so I open calculator. I'm just going to minimize it. So at the very bottom of this, with Windows 10, there's so many processes, but where is calculator? It should come up. Okay. Well, this is not how I imagined it. Okay, so right now what I was trying to show was to show an example, but and I have no idea what I'm looking for. You know what? Let's try Notepad. There you go. There you go, Notepad. So you can get even more information. So if you right click it, it was properties new. I forget, but the shortcut was Control L, and you should see this view. So I forget how you normally would get to that view. And you can see things like, and this is where Windows internals would come useful. Hopefully people can see this properly, but if you're seeing it in your VM, you can actually click any process. You'll see things like, the file, so probably what files maybe are being used by this process. Keys, so this would be your registry keys, where they have themselves registered in registry. Mutant is your mutex, so that's your synchronization objects. Is many different things, and this is useful when analyzing malware. So say you do a static analysis on malware, it creates a mutex, but you don't know where it is in the process. Maybe you can automate it and search for processes that have certain mutexes. And the colors all mean different things. I forget exactly what they are, but I think if you have to go into sysinternals, there's a pretty good description, process explorer. Ah, yes. How did I open the analysis box for the Notepad process? That's one of the questions. Within the process explorer, just type Control plus L. I'll just type that in. So it's not capital L, but I just put capital L so it's clear. Yes. And process monitor, was it? Yeah, his process explorer. Yeah. So yeah, so it's pretty cool. And I think like now if you go to, if you right click, you can look at properties. But because right now VM is not connected to the internet, you normally, it would get a hash and you can look it up on WireStorl. So that was an extra feature I think set up sometime last year, I forget. And or maybe 2 years ago. And then yes, so you can get properties just like in Task Manager, a lot of extra things. So now you know where to look for. Oh yes, you can also sort by process name or PID name, or you can do find, handle, or DLL. There's a lot of things that can be done here. Me, why I don't know so much about it, I know the basics, is because I tend to stick to static analysis more. But I feel, being a beginner in malware analysis, it's useful to see what it's like to be infected with malware and to see what that's like doing dynamic analysis, because it still helps and you can do screenshots and use that in your report. So that's, one process. Explorer is one tool. You can leave it open because we're going to run some samples. And then there's process monitor. So we can open that, accept whatever license term and agreements. So process on monitor it's pretty noisy, and it's the most detailed one because it shows you each and every process and since you started the start of operation. So usually I like to have all these tools open beforehand before I start the malware process, because I want to see at the very start what that process is doing. So now there's so much noise, you can filter it. So at the very top you'll see filter, and again you click on filter. You can save your filters as well, and you can see all the different ways you can reduce this noise. So let's just say I want to filter only process name that is, there's many of, or begins with, so on and so forth, notepad.exe. So when you have named your malware sample, you give it a name, you probably want to do something like this. But it's not always useful. Say if the malware kills its own process and executes itself as another process name, you'll miss that information. But then just go back and you can create even more filter list, but you also want to include maybe another process name, so on and so forth. So we just apply, and you should see it clears off everything else, but you'll see Notepad. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close Notepad, and so now you see how it closes. How do I clear? So let's just clear everything, start from fresh. And I'm going to just open up Notepad. So imagine it is your malware process. So once you start it, oh shoot, open Notepad++. That's not the one. There you go. There. So now you can see, so now it started, what threads it's created, that's always good. And then you can see what it's trying to access, any registry keys it was trying to modify, so on and so forth. That's pretty cool. But yeah, so anyways, let's just clear that and close this for now. And then finally, we have a Microsoft Network Monitor. So this one is not being maintained anymore, but it's pretty useful. And I like to run this, and I'll show this more when we run a file, because then you will see all the network activity. So normally how you would start is, new capture, and then you press start. So right now you will see whatever network activity is being happening, but most probably it's systems files attempting to connect for whatever reason. And yeah. And now these other tools I won't touch about disassembler. Debuggers will actually go into dnspy. But because I did not install PEID, I'm just going to say right off, the first two files are .NET samples, and we're actually going to start debugging them in this workshop. There's also other tools like CyberChef, sandboxes, resources. If we get time, we'll go to them. But this is what I want to show for now. Of course, I've been talking so much about Windows VM. Feel free to ask questions anytime, at any point. I've chosen to only do a few of the tools, so not to be overwhelming. And I chose malware where these tools are sufficient enough to help you with the analysis. Now we have our Linux. So I'll move on to there. If you have questions, put it in. So in the guide, I've mentioned about running inetsim, which go ahead and do that as well again. So let it run. It's an internet simulator. So I'm just going to open. Do I have? Is this the one? This. Yeah. If you look up on it, it gives you more detail about. It's not this. I think this was the fake DNS. So it simulates an internet. It's really good. I had modified the VM already, created some settings. So normally if you're creating your own malware analysis lab from scratch, you will have to create all these settings. And that's why I also chose Remnux, because it had inetsim in it. So now we are running it, and you will notice here the log directory. So any network activity that's happening on your Windows VM should be picked up by inetsim. And then let's open another terminal and run fake DNS. So this again is simulating, fake DNS as well. So you don't need to do this, but I'll just show. What was it to me? Like in your Windows network. So check network properties. So actually I'll open up another terminal. So as we all know, a Linux VM has this as the IP, 192.168.56.101. And as you can see here, I've set this Linux VM as a DNS server. So right now, that's why we want to be able to run fake DNS, so it acts as a DNS server. And so in this case, the malware thinks there is network connectivity. Obviously, the payload is expecting won't be the payload it requires, but we want to simulate that so we can see what it's like in real life. And so this IP of the Windows VM is just, at the end it's 102, so it's different. And, as you have already tested, if you had to say go to any browser, say you can go to anything. Okay, it's frozen. Yeah, that's good. So you go to any site and you should see the fake site that comes. Even say you're trying to download whatever fake something.exe, it will provide you with a fake executable, and it's really small. It does nothing. So it really simulates it cool. So what we can do is, because there's so many, let's just stop all this and let's just do a new capture for your network monitor, clear all that old thing. Let's just change our filters for process monitor. So forget this, apply. Okay, oh yeah, then it shows everything. And let's create a snapshot. Let's save the state so we don't have to open up all our tools every time. Take snapshot. I'm going to name it tools all opened. Ta-da. Yes. So meanwhile, if your snapshot's been created, that's cool. We will actually, this is the first exercise. So this is the file, this is the hash. Don't look it up on VirusTotal yet. Actually, no, but the first one, yeah, don't look it up because it'll be cool to see what some of you think based off just the dynamic analysis alone, what it's trying to do. And this one, I will do it with you. But the next one, I will give enough space and you're going to do it by yourself. Cool. Okay, my snapshot is created. Great. Just going to minimize all this. Right, I just put my Linux VM in the background, so don't have to bother. Make this bigger. You can see all sorts of tools. I'm going to open, extract all. Extract, yes, the password. Just a second, I'll give you the password. Why is my mouse not working? Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, there. The password is infected123, all lowercase. And hopefully everyone has been able to get it onto their VM. Yes, where was I? Extract all. Yeah, sure. Infected123. Oops. Nice. Okay. So we're going to rename it. So for now, I'm just going to rename it whatever, as long as it has a .exe. Oh, sorry. I realized I sent the password to a private message. Everyone in meeting. Infected. 1, 2, 3. There. It's numbers 1, 2, 3. Everyone got that? Cool. So I'm gonna name it whatever. I'm just gonna say, I don't know what you are. Susie. So whatever name you give it, cool. Don't double click it yet. What we're gonna set up a process monitor. So the name you gave it, let's just go to filter and say process name is, mine is no idea.exe. So now we keep it all ready. Okay. Everyone ready, set, go? Cool. And just, run it. So we're gonna run it. Oh, it's telling me I need to install a Mingxi software. Well, why not? I am a very clueless user. I have no idea. I thought I've downloaded a Mingxi software. Sure. Let's do okay. And you don't need to do okay. Maybe you want to see what happens in the background, but did it. There's no installation coming up. Okay, so now let's see what's going on. So, oh, it thinks I'm trying to drag and drop. Let's make things bigger. So there's a lot of information. Not every bit of this information is useful. So maybe you want to put your filter even more to based on operation alone or not. But you know what? Feel free to go through. If anyone, what I'll do is 2-3 minutes, go through. Do you see anything interesting? Something any one of you would like to point out? Well, there's a lot of stuff happening. I think this works. If I do Control F. Yeah, so you can always do Control F and find for things. Maybe you want to, so okay, let's just assume, everyone's just looking through it. So, there's a lot of registry enumeration that's actually more or less sometimes normal, especially when it queries for DLLs, which are your Windows library files. For those of you that are programmers, you imagine you have a program and it's importing all these different library files, headers or modules if you're doing Python. So it's the same idea. So it requires all this, so it can use those APIs, so those export functions for whatever operation the file needs. So you don't need to go into that much depth, but sometimes that's an idea of what's happening here. Okay, the question is, how can we add the process for which we know process is a malware? So if it is for process monitor, all you need to do is you go to filter and you filter. Again, filter, yes. And then from there, based on what name you gave your process, you would select, process name is in the same exact case letters. So in this case, I labeled it as noidea.exe. And then you add, you apply, and it should work. Okay. And here you'll see it's using .NET, so it gives you a good idea. It's .NET, so it was programmed C#. That's what it's doing. Okay, let's go down. Sometimes it's not really clear. You'll see a bunch of close and open files. So it seems to like query here, for example, query directory, so if you do like search directory or something. Yeah, so it's querying for its file, and what it does is sometimes you have a malware, it has additional payload in its own binary, so it tries to read itself. Is a policy, but because this is so simple, you might not see too much signals, is that what they call, in this particular file. Okay, but enough of this. Let's try Process Explorer. This is Process Explorer. I'm just going to sort it by this way. This is, so we don't see, okay. So you don't see, the process name here. So that's interesting. Does it mean that it deleted itself? Sure. So maybe we should have also left this open so we could see the process had actually started. Oh, you see it? Okay, never mind. Okay, so someone does see it. It's very noisy. I've tested this on a VM on my Linux machine. But if you guys do see it, that's awesome. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it again. And before I click OK, I'm going to see if it comes up here. Hmm. I do not see it for some reason. Oh, here we go. No idea. Yes, you could see. So, this gives you an indication how it described itself. So let's see that in detail. Any mutex. Sometimes, it also helps. You can Google these words and see, these common mutex names or something. Maybe it creates its own mutex. Maybe like you can see which path it's running from. Good, cool. So now let's look at Microsoft Network Monitor. Ah, I forgot to say start. But that's all right. This is our first file, and many times, and this is good because this shows that oftentimes, we forget to initialize our settings. But that's okay. If this happens, you just go back to your snapshot and all good. So now here we can see there's some traffic. It's unknown. Normally you would see the PID, but sometimes if it shows, it's pretty cool. And you can see here, you know, there's like, oh, there's a GET request being made. Does it show you PID? No. And so you could see here from where to where. And of course, it'll show you 101 because that's the DNS we set it up. But you know, this looks kind of different. Okay, no, that's the payload you're getting. So obviously it's your iNet SIM default page. But you know, we see this request here as well. And because it's HTTP, you can see more interesting things. And it also, if you go to your Linux, you may see here things come up. So you can see here, I'd earlier browsed to anything.com, and then you can see all these different requests being made. Still, it doesn't give us an indication that this is, if it's, is this coming from the sample? Is this malicious? So what were the questions I've posed? Oh yeah, this is not, those are old ones. Okay, so the question I'm getting is someone thinks the internet is not configured properly. Well, yes, it should not be. You should not have internet connectivity, hence why we have the internal network set up, because you're, oh, okay, sorry. Let's just see. Okay, meanwhile, she types what we're going to do. Okay. So has anyone been able to find, so are there any files created? You know, because I kind of know what the file does already. What I'm going to do is search for create file. So yeah, so sometimes you might not see it in the process explorer, this particular malware process, and that's one of the questions in Zoom, and that's fine, because it most probably just deleted itself, or it executed itself as another process, or it just terminated process. But here we see it does create a file, and it shows you, oh no, so here create file in a Windows API doesn't necessarily mean create file always in that sense. It could use that same API to open, read a file, or to write a file. So then you'd have to, you know, trace back more and more. But you can see it's being referenced a lot. So read. Because what we're looking is for write. And this, you see this also a lot, these zones. That comes when it tries to do an internet connectivity. Okay, so fine, we saw that. Just a second. I was gonna put the air condition hot, it's so hot. Okay. Okay. So anyways, actually I was trying to see where it makes internet connection, but I can't seem to find it, and that's fine. You know, for those that are unable to connect to the Linux machine, you know, feel free to take your time trying to set that up. Because this is being recorded, you can always, and you'll always have access to these samples, so you can always come back to them for sure. So what we're going to do is, for now, we're going to open it up in, we're going to debug it, you know, to get a better understanding of this. So if you were able to see network connectivity, that's good. Oh, hey, look, there's something that comes up. sometimes malware takes time. They don't immediately show that there is network connectivity. So you do see this, and as you can see in Microsoft Network Monitor, this is the PID 4264. So let's just okay, so that PID is no longer running. So that's a good indication that, hey, there was, a process that was trying to make connection. But again, that doesn't seem to help. These are HTTP requests here. It's a Microsoft update, so never mind. Okay. So now, we can close all of this tools for now. I don't want to save any. Do you want to save? Nope. Just so, it's not too many processes necessarily running. So for this, you do not need your Linux, but let it be running. So just to show for those that are having troubles having it work as a fake DNS. What we're going to do is, so this is what I guess I was referring to, where Windows VM just decides to shut itself. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to go back to my save snapshot, and some of you can do it. You don't need to because you're not going to run the other malware yet. And so I'm going to restore. I don't want to create a snapshot of the saved machine. And I'm going to start. This decides to make it tiny. So what we are going to do is we're going to open dnspy. So let's open up dnspy. And this process, this particular malware sample is actually 32 bits. So I can just lay it out here. Since we don't have PID, and we are not looking up at it statically. Oh, in fact, there's also another tool here that I've forgotten to mention called PE-Bear. So you'll see it on your desktop. And this is also a cool open source tool written by Hasharazad, and she's also a malware reverse engineer. So we're going to open that just to give you an idea what it's like to look at the particular file static properties. And then let's go back to our samples. Oh, yes, I should have probably restored the snapshot that I had this already done. So the one way you can do is you can just drag and drop the file into PE-Bear, or you can go to File, Load PE, and go over there. And you can see, some interesting information like, does this show you if it's 32-bit? No, okay, you can see file alignment. You can get the hash here for sure, DOS header, file header, and Intel 386, that means 280, 32-bit. Then you go to the sections of the file. Not going to touch on this too much, but just an idea if you want to find out what type of file we're dealing with. And let's go back to our .NET's dnspy. So this is a debugger for .NET samples. And because it is 32-bit, we are going to go for the x86 executable. Let's double click that. And if it works, yes, it may take time. Just gonna make it full screen. Again, you can open. So, if it's a renamed file of yours, you could go there. Or it doesn't necessarily need to be renamed. If it's not, all you need to do is make sure you select as you open all files so you can see all file types. So this was a particular hash. Let's open it. And So now there's a lot of information here, but I'm going to show you a few shortcuts. So far, I guess everyone has been able to get up to this point. So the reason I chose a .NET sample for debugging is I find it's a lot more easier to read than direct assembly, like push and pop statements. And you know, if programming is something you do day to day, you'll find it a lot more easier to follow. And if it is not, that's okay. You will still get an idea. But you know, having programming does help a lot in following statically. So what I normally do is if you right click, you can go to the entry point of this particular file. So when a file is started in Windows, where would it normally start running? And as you noticed, when you were double clicking on that particular file, it was like a form, you know, it asks you to click and interact with it. Hence why you tend to see this type of view. But here on the left-hand side also, you can see a lot more different attributes. So now, if you're familiar with C#, then this may look familiar, but, or if not, just being able to understand how an object-oriented program works. So now, you know, this is our main application. The malware author decided to leave it as Windows Form Application 1, and it has two classes. So if you hover over it, you'll see class and form 1, and then there's this other class called program. And if you click on form 1, then you'll tend to see all you know, private methods, public methods, all these things that are initialized, and they did not obfuscate the names. So this is a pretty simple malware, and here it's pretty clear what they're trying to do. Button 1 click. Oh, when you click that button, this will be executed. And of course, they did some obfuscation and so on and so forth. Oh, you're already starting to see some interesting strings here. And if you go again, the same class, the program class seems to do something only simple. It only has a main, and that's very common in Windows as well as Linux executables. The malware, if there's a main function, it'll start from main. So when you are starting static analysis, you now know where to look for. So these, now you can just hover over it and you'll tend to see it says system. So it's a system function. So you don't need to click on it, otherwise you will see the system function and how they implement. But you want to see ones that come from the malware itself. So for example, if you hover over form 1, that's from the form 1 class. So we can go there, and then from form 1, initialize components. So now we have an idea what is being executed at the very start. And so you can see here, this is the layout. It uses all these fonts. It has 2 different buttons, install, and so you don't necessarily need to know C#, but you can get an idea, form 1 load. So this is clearly where, you know, a lot of this will be loaded, but there's also other stuff, say form 1 close. So when say the user closes the message box, what's being happening, so on and so forth. And we'll start debugging this to see what it looks like. Oh, okay, form 1 load doesn't have much. So I want you to just, you know, kind of play around, look at things. So you don't necessarily need to start it from the very beginning because these are clear set strings. You can see interesting things. Like at the very beginning of Form 1 class, you start seeing this label 3 click. So when the person clicks whatever that label is, it's trying to execute this process start and it's looking for this. But now the thing is, so now we see that this is what gets executed. So what I'm going to do is, because I'd already run it before, I'm going to go into my Linux and see if, you know, on the fake DNS, if there was any requests being made for that. And I don't seem to see it. So clearly this didn't seem to get executed and there was no request being made. Probably explains why I didn't see it in Explorer of file or the process monitor. And then you would, you know, from here you try and retrace back which was the process that is responsible for this or method responsible for this. Then you see here it seems to have some sort of obfuscation. where this type of function. And then you can see here in this function, it's trying to get the folder path for the special folder environment path and looking for this file, but it creates the file. So now you know that that Minxie VB script file you saw earlier was actually created and it didn't already exist. And this is what it's writing onto that file. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, because it had crashed earlier, I'm just going to start executing that file again. Actually not executing, so it's so what we're going to do is step into it in the debugger. So again, you can right click and say go to entry point. And what we're going to do is you're going to put a breakpoint at run.new form. So the way to do that is once you get to the entry point, you right click and you say add breakpoint before you start debugging. Ah, yes, but this is, I had renamed the file. So let's see if it may not work for me, but I'm going to see. So I'm going to start debug a program, or you can press F5. Of course, because I renamed it's confused. So I'm going to go to where I'd saved the file and it was under samples, open. Arguments, sometimes some samples take in arguments you need to pass. But I'm just going to say entry point again, but I already have a breakpoint, so I know it should not execute completely. Okay. Oh, it's a 64-bit application. Ha. But it is 32-bit. You know what? We're just gonna do what DNSpy says. I don't know why it complained, but if you get that error, close this and go back to DNSpy, and we're gonna open this main one. I'm just gonna open back to desktops, samples, open my file. I've not started debugging yet, but I'm going to right click it and go to entry point. I think, what's a shortcut? So to add a breakpoint is toggle breakpoint is F9. So this one is always, it always strips me off because there's some debuggers where F9 means run the entire program. So it's always good to keep in mind what your shortcuts are when you're dealing with debuggers. And now I'm going to start. So of course it picks up what the file is. I'm just going to say entry point to see if it really stopped at the very beginning. Yeah, and it did. Cool. So like, I don't know how many of you have been debugging, you know, you're in school, you're debugging that Java program or whatever, you're stepping over, stepping into, it's pretty much the same as it is like here. All that means, so stepping over, for those that may not be very comfortable debugging, is we're trying to skip over this particular function. We don't really necessarily care about system functions. This is just enabling a lot of the startup code. And stepping into is we want to step into that method, go into it and see. So now we know step by step what it's trying to do. I won't go through the entire file completely, and feel free to bypass me. I'm just going to show little by little. For stepping over, F10 is a shortcut, and to step into, it's F11. So I'm going to step over this, just step F11, yes, so step into it. So now it's decompiling. Oh yes, then it's going to, I guess, initialize whatever constants that it needs to initialize. But you know, it can take some time. So actually what I'm going to do, there was a label 3 click, right? So open up the form. And it was a method, which I've seen earlier. So this was the one which started this process. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a breakpoint here. And let's go back to form, main one so I can see. And I'm going to also put a breakpoint here. the way it creates the file. I don't necessarily want to step into everything, but in the main form, there was also button one click. What does that do? That calls another function. I'm going to click on that. Oh, so this is the one. So, okay, great. I have my breakpoint there. Let's go back. I think it was initialize component. What else is it? There was this function, button one click, label three click. There's form closing and form closed. Anything interesting? Okay, sure, why not? Oh yes, now you can see here, this was the dialog that popped up. So that's cool. Let's put a breakpoint there. Form closing, there's nothing. And probably they had to initialize it because that's how it's set up. And I'm just going to run instead of stepping in it one by one. But maybe you'd like to do that in your spare time. Oh, so see, so now we get the pop-up and it's running because it expects an input. And I put breakpoints at on the label. So something like, I don't know, it's, oh, and the button. So let's see, if I click this, oh yes, look at that. Okay, it's stuck. Okay, let's just, I know. Oh yes, it's, so I clicked on the label of the process and now it stopped here where the breakpoint is. And that's not something what I had done earlier. So I have my Linux on the side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to step over this so it executes it. Huh, interesting. Because, oh yes, because I clicked on that label and it was like a EULA statement. It says, how do I want to open it? I just said, whatever, Internet Explorer. And does it open? And I have no idea. Oh yes, there. Well, see? And now you can see this. So that explains, we did not click on the label earlier. So we did not see, you know, that particular site. And you tend to see this in your fake DNS as well. And sometimes you should see this in your log. So also what you can do in your Remnux is open Wireshark over there and connect it to this internal network adapter. And then you can see requests there. But I didn't want to have too much tools open at the same time. So keep it as simple as possible. Let's just close tabs. Okay, where was the, cool. So now to continue running so we can interact with that form, let's just say continue, cool. So then you see now it shouldn't stall because now we can interact with it. So now let's click on the OK, the button. So great, now you see here, it stopped here. So, and also here at the bottom, there's something I'm not mentioned. You'll tend to see the variables and what gets initialized. So let's go forward and step over this. So it's trying to find for a special folder called application data. That's your app data folder path. And here it tries to get that folder path, cool. And it saves, it calls this particular function and this particular function, it's called this. Let's look at that a bit. Yeah, it's that little obfuscation thing. I'm going to detail what it does. It's just, whoops, go back here. And it saves that as text. So, you know, if you know it's just saving it as a text, then you can see, oh, there's some, got this next. And again, it calls this function. So it's really trying to get some strings. And this was the folder path. So now you know, and you can see it here, what is the path of that process that it's, and this is, you know, the path plus VBS. You don't, so let's actually go there. So it's called, it's under C, users, because it's hidden and, you know, you'd have to reset to view all hidden folders. You're just going to type it in there. So yes, user. Let's do app data, and it was what, roaming, Microsoft, Windows. Wow, that's quite a long path. Start menu, programs, Startup. I mean, of course, you could always just right click and copy this file and put it out there. But as you can see, there's no file yet. So now, of course, it's creating the file. Let's just put, before it executes this file, let's just put it a breakpoint there. And I'm just going to run it through. Cool. Oh, yes. And step over this where it writes it. As you can see, it creates it, but it's empty. So let's just step over it. Cool. And text 4, so you can see it tries to execute this file. Let's refresh. It didn't work. Did I get it right? So for some reason, it was not able to write it. And that could explain why it was not working on my VM, which is pretty funny. I guess this is one of those demo fails. If it has worked on your VM, that's cool. What I would recommend doing is then, you right click and you open it. I have installed Notepad++ on the system. Cannot open it. Okay, what are we going to do? So let's just try to start. Used by another process. Huh, okay. So, no, it could be because did I double click it? Ah, yes, I probably did. Actually, I'm not sure. Oh, well. So I could not run it, but the idea was maybe why we could not be able to see the request being made. And hopefully it was able to run on your VM. If anyone, it was able to run on your VM, feel free to take a snapshot of it, like a screenshot and share. Of course, be careful with sharing this link. This is, as you can see, it would have been an HTTP file. Oh, but we can tell from this, it was click link redirect.com. And that's, I think, something similar we saw earlier. And it should be here, click link redirect.com. And we saw some requests being made earlier. So it did work in the previous run that I have, and probably doesn't work when I'm debugging it. And then you can see here, it exits and exits, and hence why we don't see the environment, we don't see this process anymore. So this is where dynamic analysis has failed us. And it's funny, I labeled it as a dynamic analysis exercise. Okay. For those that have not already done it yet, you can look up the hash on VirusTotal to give you more context. So, what type of this file was, what type of file it was. It's actually a coin miner. And I guess the request that it's trying to make was maybe it would install a type of file, a mining file onto your machine. And then it would execute it. As you can see, the Visual Basic script would execute it. And there was a loop, so it would keep making a request if it had gotten created, and till it gets the file and executes it, then terminates. So here, this is all the different detections. There's some people, if any comments, you can see if it's being related. Oh, look, there's all sorts of different requests. So VirusTotal runs it in their own sandboxes on their side of the server, so you can see the requests being made. So yes, I know it took a bit longer, but I just want to make sure if people kind of found that useful, helpful, or just plain lost. Meanwhile, I'll just open this. So I also, looked up CoinMiner because this wasn't of a particular malware family. So I just looked up CoinMiner, and you can see what the description usually is. And if it were to successfully install this particular file that it makes a request for, then you would see a lot of CPU usage. And that's where Process Explorer would be useful, because you saw the CPU column. You would see quite a significant spike there. Cool. So someone on Discord has posted what the VB script file looks like, and that is super cool. Well, since you have access to the other two samples, I would recommend doing exercise number two. I'm not going to do it like the first one and one and go through each tool or anything. Um, but if anyone wants to pitch in, was process monitor helpful in getting anything useful? Was anything that gave you an idea? Maybe see. Oh, yeah, this is interesting. You can see there are a lot of requests being made by this particular process. So now that's cool. This is, I guess, where the dynamic analysis actually helps. Then, you can go into detail about that. Maybe let's see here. Oh, yes, I think what was the process? I named the process as test.exe and it's still running. It didn't exit. Anything funky? You can see there's a bunch of different threads it has created. So clearly we see these same mutex names as the last process, so it's not unique to only the malware. Could be .NET related as well. But you could see it's still in the same location, so it didn't change itself or doesn't have even child processes, nothing. It's cool. And let's take a look at Microsoft Network Monitor. Oh, there's, I guess this is not the one, system unavailable. Let's see, there was it Explorer. What was the PID? 2584. Sometimes you can see that here. Oh, and it is there. So it's, in this case, I actually see the process name, and that's cool. I can see this. So far, it's just TCP, um, but you can see the destination. Um, you could see if there's any. There's a different weird ports. You can see there's all sorts of weird ports. So it's not your usual HTTP, which is AT or HTTPS. Okay, so that's a good idea. Hopefully people are able to see some things like that. Probably they also noticed more. Um, but for now, we could go to the program. And in this case, I'm not going to, debug it for you. As all of you may have guessed, to find the entry point, you right-click and you find the entry point. It doesn't always work for most samples, especially if you have a .NET obfuscator or packer. You try to avoid making analysis easier. But this is for, I chose a sample which didn't have any of that. And it also had, like the previous sample, of form, and it's not always the case. In here as well, it initializes that form component. But we didn't see any dialog box pop up. And as you can see, it didn't have any, I guess, boxes or objects where the user can interact. In fact, it only had form load. And it was part of the class called form1, which is, oh yeah. And here you can see, like, it's even like there's two packages, and each package has a bunch more different classes, so it's definitely bigger. So these are all the different, so this one is another class, but there's the form1 class, and it's quite big. So first off, could anyone more or less guess from what they've seen, like even just going through, what type of malware we're dealing with? The previous one, it wasn't simpler to identify because it was trying to download the file. You could say it was a downloader, but it also happened to download a coin miner. What type of file would you consider this? What I see here is a method to stop processes. So it's trying to kill processes. That's crazy. Oh, look, it's looking for things like Microsoft security and other files it's trying to delete. And if maybe you Google this file, what is this? MSOK logs, MSO client. They're probably related to Windows Defender, you will see. And you can see that sometimes the method names are quite clear. What actions? Oh, crazy. It's got an update me. So it's clearly updating itself. And so any takes? Anyone has a guess? Let's see what other is a your drives. Oh, it's looking up, it's checking folders, drives. Wow, it's a busy bee. Okay. Okay, there's no takes. Well, without further ado, this is an APT sample. It's a part of, it's a Crimson Rat. And if maybe you've looked up the hash already on VirusTotal, and do they give away what it is? And you can see some of them label it as Crimson. That's cool. And then the community. Wow. And this is something, it's called Yara rules. It's a way of writing a detection rule on a malware. Not something I'm talking about here, but you can see there's people, they have their Yara rules firing on it. Crimson Rat. It's cool. So we can go to Malpedia and look it up as well, what the definition is. And well, it's a rat, as you guess, a remote access Trojan. So you can imagine what that does. It gets into your computer and it basically does things like it can maneuver, it looks at your folders, your drives, it tries to pick up your files. So let's see, it's it's upload files. So it's downloading files from your system as if it were a remote access tool, but in this case, a malicious tool for that matter. And you can see a lot of different articles that have been written about it. Okay, so on Discord, it's mentioned that there is an exercise on Moose's platform that some of you are part of for writing our rules. I myself don't know what the Moose's platform is, but we can, yeah, for sure. Do feel free to share that for those that may not know. It seems pretty cool and interesting. And I think, where was it? I have so many links open. Okay, I'm just going to, what was it, MITRE ATT&CK. It should be here under groups. I'm just doing a search, Crimson. Okay, no. Maybe, oh here, search. It may work. Oh, Crimson. So yeah, so they even have, and they show you the phases like credential dumping, command and control. So yeah, so now we know what type of file we're dealing with. In fact, one of those articles on Malpedia touches on this file. So I can share that later, and you can definitely go back, use that article to read through it, and then you yourself can try to replicate their findings and see if you can reverse engineer and analyze the sample too. Is there any persistent techniques? Like, is it trying to create a copy of itself or any file? I've not analyzed this malware completely by myself, so I'm just going to say no for now, and I don't think we have much time to delve into that. But we can just go over. Let's see what other stuff it has. It's cool enough to create an error class. Man, okay, oh, that's cool. However, though, what I wanted, the last question, can you find the command and control server info? So I know we have the Microsoft network monitor tool. Oh my God, that just shut on me. Anyways, hopefully this is not happening to you guys, and I don't know why it's happening for me. But I'll restart it. I'm just gonna start from the beginning. But as I was saying, this is the last question that I have, which was find the command and control server. And this one was pretty tricky, and you can see the connections being made. You can see the requests that are being made. Now, I was wondering if anyone was able to find that in their static analysis, because there's a pretty clever trick they've used. So yeah, I did not clean the snapshot. I'm just opening an already infected snapshot with the rat. So I can just open DNSpy. My screen doesn't want to resize. Oh, there it does. Okay, cool. Yeah, some of you are parsing through sysinternals. That's nice. Just gonna open that again. Test. Cool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at my Linux. Oh yes, I don't know if I'm able. In this case, it was probably a good idea for me to open up Wireshark as well, so I can see all that traffic. And in case my VM crashed, I had that packet capture. But because I already know what the C2s are, I know this is one of them for sure. So I'm just gonna go through it right now. And we're going to find where it's making this particular C2 communication. So now why is that important? I mean, we already established it's a malware. Why bother finding the C2 comms? And that's because as a malware analyst, it's not only just writing reports on the type of file. Sometimes you might need to be a threat hunter. You might need to find out what their command and control C2s are, so you can create, say, you can first and foremost share that information and to other security vendors, so they know which C2, which IP addresses to block. And then you can use that information to communicate with the server if you know from doing your static analysis how this particular malware communicates to that server. So then you can try and change the commands, as you make a packet request and get back malicious payload. That's not something I'm going to show here, but I'm going to show a kind of an idea what that's like searching for the methods that make these sort of requests. So here, for one thing, is I analyzed that part and I forgot, so I might or may not completely be able to show everything that happens here, but let's look at some things like M server. That seems like a good place to start to see where the C2 information is. Let's just click on M server, set up app, pass info. So you can see here, they call this server data a lot, and that's part of, so let's just go there. And you can see whatever information it gets, and this is, because I've analyzed it before, I'm really cutting it short for you. It encodes it in UTF-8. It probably also encrypts it, so you don't necessarily see all that information in plain text. So that's what it's doing here. And here's where it's receiving data. So now you want to know where it saved this IP. So in this particular, yeah, next time I should choose like a smaller file. Oh yeah, this was actually default P was kind of the default port. You know what, I'm just gonna go back to entry point, form. Yeah, because I wanted some time for Q&A, so form load. So let's see at the very beginning what it's doing. Oh yeah, so here it's initializing its configuration. It's trying to get, again, the app data, special folder path. It's trying to get that USB path. Interesting. So I guess where it wants to save all this information. Oh, look at here, default P. So this could give an indication, that this is probably the C2. But in my logs, you can see it is slightly different. It is not 110.201.122.120. And this is what I thought was pretty clever of them. And it's pretty clever because, say you're writing a detection and you have a simple script that just looks at strings and you're like, aha, I found an IP and it's malicious. But somewhere in this particular file, it's overridden by another value that is obfuscated, that's encoded. And then when you deobfuscate it, you should get this particular IP. So it's not really this. But this port looks similar, the 10001 that we saw earlier in the Microsoft Network Monitor. So the ports was still the same. So the only thing is to find where it changed, where it was trying to decrypt for the real C2 IP. Yeah. If you find it, please do share. Meanwhile, I'm just going to ramble. Yep. I don't think it was there. All I know what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to each and every class, because see if I can recognize the method. Oh, nope. Yeah, there's a die process. Ah, I believe it was this one. So I forget how in dnspy you can see which function is responsible to reference this. But this was the one, and you can see these are encoded bytes, and it replaces some of those bytes and it splits them. Actually, I don't know if this is the one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and remember one of those tools that I've mentioned in here that I've not gone through? I'm just going to show it to you quickly. One of them was CyberChef. So yeah, let's open in the new tab. CyberChef is really cool. So if you see you see the malware, for example, using base64 encryption, whatever encryption, and you want it to quickly see how you can decrypt all that, you can definitely go to CyberChef, and they have all these tools over here that you can use. So I'm just going to paste that. Oops. No, that's not the one. Did I have bidirectional? Oh, yes. And of course, you have to make sure you have it bidirectionally, otherwise it cannot copy. Okay. So because I think this is from decimal. Because there's space. So normally I do this on an editor, but I think it's comma is a semicolon. Oh, that worked. So you can see here there are these particular IPs, but we didn't see that yet. So maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it was not 101. So if I had my PCAP catcher, I would be, oh, now my 122.87.136.213.12. Okay. Oh yes. So that was the reverse lookup. So that's why it's backwards. So it's 213.136.87.122. There you go. So this was one of the IPs that's being used. So maybe there's more. It's quite a big file. And I would advise, go to Malpedia, look up Crimson Rat, or even the SHA. You can do a Google search and see which article references it and reverse it yourself. So, okay, hopefully that was helpful. There is exercise 3 here as well. It uses assembly. So this is where you'd use Ghidra or IDA 7 to disassemble it. dnspy wouldn't work. You would need to use x64 debugger and be a bit more comfortable with assembly. But I'm not going to touch it here, and maybe that's for next time. But I'm open to anyone having questions. I'll leave this open if you have questions regarding Crimson Rat, or anything else. Do feel free to pitch in. Okay, we're seeing a question come up. Okay. So the question is, when do I normally do the jump between static to dynamic analysis? In it has changed over time. In the beginning, when I first started doing malware analysis, I did a lot of dynamic. And I think because back then also, 2011, the malware were a lot more simpler and you could see a lot of signals from just dynamic tools. And I found over the years with all this obfuscation, uh, all the different packers that malware use, I found static actually a lot more easy. And then from there, then you start automating things, especially where you know it's using a commercial packer. You unpack the file, makes it easier to read. Then you'd use tools like Ghidra or IDA, and you can leverage uh, Python in on these tools to, again, decrypt for any obfuscated strings. And it can get complicated. It can get really crazy. And nowadays, what I do is I use in-house sandboxes, at my company, or also some of the online sandboxes. So I'll bring this up again. And like any.run or cape, cape is open source. Any.run, it's free. They have a free and paid version. Free means all your analysis are public, but then you can see interesting information there. Like if I just go through, let's just do this cape sandbox because I like it's all these security engineer researchers that have come together putting this, which is pretty cool. So you can see some of the existing runs. So it's kind of like, they have run this on VMs and they use Cuckoo. So all this is run on VMs and you see interesting strings. But normally what I was going to say was I would, there's all these automated systems that I have access to. And one of them was where you dump the memory. And then once the memory gets dumped, I'm able to extract the unpacked file. And that's where you use things like Yara rules to be able to detect for any strings that are, or code or bytes that are specific to that malware family. And you can find that in memory. And accordingly, then you have further scripts, I use Python a lot, to extract all that information. So these days, yes, I'm mostly static. And static is hard, but the more and more you do it, it gets easier. And that's where Windows internals help, because now you have a trove of knowledge and information. So it takes time to build up. And as in the guide it's mentioned, you need patience and curiosity. But like anything, the more you do it, it'll get better. Cool. I mean, if there's not much questions about malware analysis, just an idea, was this helpful? This the way in which demonstrated analyzing samples, was it, or you wish there was something different, something more? I'd like to hear thoughts. I try to imagine, what it was like when I first started doing and what things I liked. So this is very opinionated style, but it may not always be what everyone likes to do. Cool. I'm glad that, it piqued your curiosity, and that's really important. I think curiosity is almost akin to being interested in it. And if you're not interested in this, then it's can be quite a stress to reverse engineer. Nice. Mm. Cool. Some of you enjoyed the step by step. I guess it's also the guide. So this guide, I also feel you don't have to stick to these VMs I've created. You can start from scratch by your very own. You can create your own network using things like Raspberry Pi and run VPN, Tor, whatever other proxy you want, and get creative with that. That's cool. Great. Cool. I also want to share some of these other resources here. Like this one guy, and he also has a Twitter handle, Malware Traffic Analysis. And this is something I like, and maybe you might like it too, and has all these network packet captures, and you can, from this network network captures, you can do more and more analysis on it, and so it's a good training for sure. And mostly they're all malware or APT. Abuse.ch is also run, for free and open source, and it's a great place to get samples. So things like Malware Bazaar or URL House. So of course, use it at your own discretion. Be careful. You can see here, there's IoT malware, and sometimes in here as well, Malware Bazaar. So it's run, by security researchers, and they're doing it out of their spare time, and it's pretty cool. And I would also reach out to them if you have questions. So you can see, look at the number of malware families we're dealing with these days. Lots of stealers. Agent Tesla is also a stealer. Formbook, Masslogger. It's nuts. It's crazy. And this one is also really cool, Malware Unicorn. Some of you may already be following her on Twitter as well. And she created this really cool, again, step-by-step workshops. Like I'll give reverse engineering, for example. This mostly, again, touches Windows malware. And it's essentially the same. Like if I look at the environment setup, she also has VMs and what they are. Here she talks, and this is the sniffer. She calls it the sniffer VM, which is your Linux, and it has she gives step by step on how to install inetsim. So the way I worked around this was use Remnux instead. And so it's not really very detailed step by step. It's more like a really extensive, colorful cheat sheet, because you can see here now if you're doing assembly pointers and stuff. So this you have access to, and later I'm going to share my slides. Okay, cool. So yeah, we just have 10 minutes. I suppose I could, you know what, I'm gonna touch on the third one. Actually, I leave the third one up to you. Yeah, because it is assembly, and it may not be fair to talk about it, but yeah. I'm still debating. It's 10 minutes. So much for my time management skills. Sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna close these guys for now. Well, let me see. What can I talk about? I mean, there's also Remnux. Remnux also has many other different tools if you have not been able to explore. And Windows malware here, we focused on executables, but it's a whole. There's more than just executables. You're looking at malicious Office documents, and like earlier, the Visual Basic script that got dropped. So those are also another set of tools, and some things also that you can use. For now, I'm going to assume there's no questions about the exercises. I'm just going to close my VM if that's okay. Okay. Just going to cancel this. I don't know why these notes came up. Initially, I was thinking of using some really old malware, but they don't work on Windows 10. So, yes, just okay. Okay, so next question was, are there any other VMs like Remnux or vulnerable VMs? There are. Oh yes, I completely forgot about that. Okay, let's just make this bigger. There's one called Flare VM. So Flare VM, let's do their GitHub page. I can add this into the list of tools. It's like your Remnux, and it requires to be on a Windows VM. So it's basically all these set of tools that you can install on your Windows VM. I've not used this per se, but the way it works is you have your Windows VM. Since Windows is not free, you install, I think, a particular script, and then which is a PowerShell script, and then you also set up whatever you need to set up, and you execute it. You have this VM connected to your internet, and it'll download and install most known tools onto your system. Like me personally, I tend to stick to just a few tools, and a lot of times it is debuggers and disassemblers. Um, but if if you're a fan of big tools, that's cool. And I like disassemblers like Ghidra and IDA because you can create plugins to even enhance your experience once you know what you're looking for or how to automate your work. But Flarium is one of them. So yeah, so these are some of the tools it'll install, and gives you a grid list, and you can see these are all these other tools for .NET that can be used. And then AutoIt is a type of unpacker. So yeah, there's definitely a lot. treat this workshop as a starting point, a taste. Okay. So if there's no more questions, I think we can end early. It's quite a lot of stuff, a lot of things to work on. So, and it's awesome. It's Saturday. I mean, here in Montreal, it's sunny. So wherever you guys are, girls, habit. Hopefully it's sunny there as well. And yeah, and hopefully I see you in doing some malware analysis. Do share blogs if you make your own malware analysis lab. That'd be cool. I like to read as well. Okay, there's something. Oh yes. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I think we were expecting 28 participants, but from what I see, there's 16 of us, and that's awesome. That's great. I think all of you did a great job. It seemed like all of you had your VMs running. It's sorry it's not their hands-on experience, but one fine day we'll be able to meet face to face, and I can share even more with you. Cool. So yes.